I got more books. Okay, yeah, I just got an Amazon delivery with 4 new books in, and so before I go into the video, I will quickly show you those because they're pretty sexy looking. So we got Priory Under the Orange Tree, which is a lot of people have been talking about this because the sequel came out recently, I believe. So I just nabbed this one to get into the series. Got the Dandelion Dynasty, the first book in that. It's called The Greater Kings. I've seen a few people talk about this online, and I thought, you know what, sounds pretty cool. I'll pick that up. We've got Sennin Ascends, which I got for pretty much the same reason as Dandelion Dynasty. And Gunmetal Gods, which one of my favourite booktubers, and actually the author of the book I'm going to be talking about today, he spoke about this book a while ago, and I thought, sounds cool. And I looked into it again and realised it sounds quite a lot like the book that I'm currently preparing to write at the moment. So I thought, I'll read how someone else has done it, and apparently successfully, and try and learn a bit from that. So there we are, those are the new books. But anyway, the book that we're going to be talking about today is Breach of Peace by Daniel Green. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as I said, Daniel Green is one of my favourite booktubers. I've watched a lot of his videos. They tend to be my go-to if I'm sitting down and want to, scroll mindlessly for a while. I tend to try and find a Daniel Green video I haven't watched, which I can't really do anymore because I've watched most of them, but I really like what he does, and he's written a few novellas, which this is the first of them. He's written 2 at the moment, and after this one I'll definitely be getting the second one. So yeah, that's a bit of background behind the book, but what is the book about? Now, Breach of Peace is I believe Mr. Green said that this is kind of his tryout series before he launches into his main novel series that he planned. So this is the first in his build-up to that. And what it's about there's 3 members of a holy police force in this city who go to investigate a murder that launches them into a big conspiracy theory. So with the whole conspiracy theory thing, I'm going to have to say spoilers for this book in the review. If you plan on reading at any point, as always, please click off now. If you think you might check it out, click off. All of that. If not, let's get into it. I will turn Andrew Garfield onto his cheerful side for this. So, what are you thinking of the lighting, by the way? I've got my blinds open, and I think that it looks quite nice, actually. I think it looks pretty nice. So, okay. So, what did I like about this book? I think that the plot of this book was really entertaining. It takes place over the course of just one day, and so things are moving very fast, and I was always wanting to read what happened next. I mean, I read this book in chunks. I read it in 3 chunks. One bit I read while I was on a holiday one night, and then I didn't read it for the rest of the break because I hadn't got fully into it. The second bit I read on the plane home from that holiday, which I was really getting into it. And then the third bit I read today, and this was like the final half of the book, and I just zoomed through it, and I didn't stop at all. So I guess what you can get from that is that it picks up its pace in the second half, but the plot as a whole, not just how the pacing was, but just the events that occur in it. It starts off with this really horrific murder, and then it goes through to revealing like a monster that possibly committed the murder. I believe it was the monster that did the murder. There was this monster in the basement of this house that turns out to be the patriarch of the family that was murdered, and it's like, oh my god. And then that launches through the involvement of one of the main characters, Chapman. He reveals that it wasn't the rebels to this empire that committed this crime like the main character Clid initially thought, and so this launches them into a government conspiracy which leads them, and it's never really fully revealed the full conspiracy, but we do know that the government did mutate this patriarch into this thing and did commit this murder to send a message to other families, other rich families, because this family got greedy and tried to not let the Empire use all their steel, which they were developing using a new breakthrough in technology. And I lost sight of exactly what I'm trying to say here, but that's the main scope of the conspiracy right now. We know they've been testing on people with this black liquid stuff that turns people into monsters, and towards the end of the book, this thing called an Anointed comes along, and it's said to be a demigod chosen, who used to be a human who was chosen by God to ascend to godship, basically. and I think at this point I'm thinking that it's probably the black serum that does that to them, although you know, we don't know anything right now. But that's the main scope of the mystery that occurs, and as you can probably imagine from me describing that, it really pulls you along, because you get the murder and you're like, oh, this is horrible, and then you find out that the monster was actually one of the people, and you're like, oh my god, and then you learn that it's the government, and you just straight for it. So another thing that was great in this was the horror sequences, of which there are mainly two. So there's the first one at the start where Lord Pruitt, the patriarch in this mutated form, attacks Clyd, Samuel, her husband, and Chapman, and I believe Rowlands, who is a sergeant, is there as well. And that was really good. The descriptions of what Lord Pruitt looked like were really quite disgusting. I want to see if anyone's done any fan art for it, because I would like to see someone interpret what Mr. Green described in it. But it was really effective, and it was pretty gross as well. Like, it's getting shot, and it's black, like, disgusting tasting blood is getting on Clyd's face, and she's like got it in her mouth, and it's like, ugh. It had me going, ugh. And later on there's when the Anointed rocks up while the main characters are raiding a dock where apparently like dead bodies of failed experiment victims are being dumped, loaded onto a ship, which then dumps them into the sea or a river or something like that. I can't exactly remember what the body of water was, but this Anointed turns up and begins killing everyone, and it's less of the suspense thing and more of just like, oh my god, this is horrifying. Like, the Anointed is said to wear a white mask that has like this smile on it, and it's wearing it all black, and it's this unstoppable force. So I was like, okay, you're intimidating, you're making me uncomfortable. And kind of Death style in Discworld, the character of the Anointed, let me find a page, its text is different, so the thicker black text is when the Anointed is speaking. So that's pretty cool. We really like that. And kind of the final thing that I'm going to touch on, I just want to say that this book did one of the things this book did really well was it made me want to read the next one. Now, by the end of this book, all the main characters are dead. Every single one has died. Everyone involved in this thing, even remotely, is dead. And so that caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. But not having all the questions answered has definitely made the next book a lot more intriguing to me than I thought it would be around the midpoint of this book. And so yeah, I'm going to be picking up the next one soon, and I'll be reading it. So yeah, this definitely set up the rest of the series really, really well. The series is called Lawful Times, I believe. Now, another thing that was really good, and the final thing I'll be talking about, is the glimpses of the world. Now, there's not a lot of world building in this book, at least not an extreme amount. It's kind of vague. Like, you get the sense that there's a city, but there's not much of a description of the city. Most of how I interpreted the city came from the cover, with this kind of London-y looking setting. But you got a whole load of like interesting bits towards the start. There's mention of like the Museum of Kingdoms, where artifacts from conquered realms who are now under the Empire have gone. That's like a really interesting idea. And just the idea of the Empire as well. Certainly with the book that I'm fanning right now, it's set in an empire, and the possibility of having different series set in the same world in different continents is very real. And there are other glimpses with just like the idea of the Ministry of Truth being the newspaper place. I won't waffle on about it too long, but there are some really real glimpses of an interesting world, and like the Empire and it being inspired by God who brought with them technological advancements, which is yet another thing that I was doing in my book as well. But I digress. It's got some real intriguing glimpses that I hope are fleshed out later on, because they weren't really fleshed out beyond the glimpses that we got. So I hope as Mr. Green, goes into novel form or increases the size of his novellas, because I think I saw Rebels Creed, it's that big maybe, so that's thicker than this one. So then he can flesh it out a bit more, and I can see more of the world, because I'm genuinely interested in getting to know it a bit more. Now, we'll be getting onto the bad now, and there's actually quite. I'm not going to pretend, because I know a lot of most of the reviews I have seen have been really polarizing. Now, some of them have been like, "Wow, this is really, really good," and other ones have been like, "Wow, this is really, really bad." I mean, this is from the very minimal research I've done. Like, I saw this one review where this guy gave it a 0 out of 10, and I'm like, okay, and then I see some things where people give it 10 out of 10, and I'm like, okay. So I'm very much in the middle here. This book has some very real flaws, but I think on the level of being a story and being one that's good, enjoyable to read, this book delivered definitely. This is a solid book, and I'll give the star rating at the end, but this book is solid, but it does have problems. I feel bad that I'm waving it around so much, but so we'll talk about what are the issues here, and one of them is the characters. I think the most fleshed out character here was Chapman, and he's not the main POV character. There's a glimpse in his POV in this book, and I believe the Rebels Creed, the first half of the book, is from Chapman's POV retelling the events of this book. And so that's cool, because Chapman was interesting and I want to know more about his involvement with the Rebels and things like that. But the characters weren't very fleshed out. Like, you get their vibe, you've got Clid, who is the driven and devoted to her job detective type, she's kind of gritty, she smokes a lot, whole character idea, but you don't know why she is an inspector, and you don't know much about her before the events of the book. So, it's like, and it's the same with a lot of the characters, you get a real sense of who they are, but you don't really get any, once you get past the shallow end, you don't get any meat, but that makes sense. And it's a flaw that I can't really grade the book for, because this book is this big and it's got quite a chunky plot to deal with as well, so there's going to be a sacrifice of characters in a novella. So it's like, yeah, the characters weren't very fleshed out, but they definitely did the job as POV characters, and seeing them all die at the end definitely upset me. Sorry, this has just caught my eye. I've got Treebeard up here away from my Lord of the Rings book, so I'm just going to put Treebeard. All my guitar. I've got a guitar, by the way. All my guitar stuff is on this shelf, so I just you can stand there. Anyway, yeah. So they definitely, the characters, not the best, but they did the job for being characters that you could be invested in. And as I said, I was sad when they were all dying. Like Sam died, and I was like, oh no, Sam. Chapman died. I was like, oh no, Chapman. Captain Williams died. I was like, oh no, Captain Williams. And then Clid died, and I was like, no, oh no, Clid. I didn't actually expect myself to care as much as I did, but when they did die, I was like, that actually hurt me quite a lot. And I haven't read a lot of books, and a lot of the books I've read have not been particularly dark, so I'm not used to characters dying very much. But definitely in this book, I think I've gone, oh no, the most times I've ever done reading a book like out loud, which I don't do very often. I think the only times that I can remember reacting in that way, I think I've spoken about, were Attack on Titan, Fullmetal Alchemist, because of like sad character moments. Time of Contempt Witcher, because the politics were going to shit, and I could see they were going to shit. Oh, I'm swearing. And and I was like, that's so annoying. And Oliver Twist, when Bill Sikes died, I gasped out loud, and now this as well. I was going, oh no, damn, all throughout the final half. So yeah, good job there. This is meant to be the negative section, damn it, but I'm still finding things to praise. Now, I think that all the characters, not being especially fleshed out was probably a good thing, because they all die at the end. And so I think if he spent a lot of the page time with you getting to know them and really fleshing them out as people, then they will die at the end, and all of that heavy lifting has been for nothing, because there can't be any books about them after the events of this one, if that makes sense. So even though they weren't very fleshed out, it makes sense as a decision with the novella form, with the path that the story was taking, My final kind of complaint with this book was some of the writing. I think will tell you, I can't think of an example at the top of my head, but there were some points in the book where I thought, you could have perhaps got across the same thing without saying it flat out, if that makes sense. But that's a very small thing, and this is a debut novel, so I don't want to be like, burn him, he committed sacrilege with the not doing the show don't tell thing, So yeah, I don't want to touch on the negatives too much, because as I said, there are people who have now driven this thing into the ground, talking negatively about it, and I think that deserves a lot more slack as a book than some people have given it, So I'll pop you here. So basically, what's the rating? I'm giving it 3 out of 5 stars, and I feel this is the lowest rating I've given a book on here so far, but I'm starting to feel my way around how I'm rating things, and now at this point, giving this 3 out of 5 stars, I think I would probably go back on some of my Discworld reviews of The Colour of Magic and Light Fantastic and bring them down from 5 as well, because I think I was just bit excited when I spoke about those. But yeah, now 3 out of 5, some people might be like, that's not very good, but it is good. The word, like, 5 is going to be like, this is a favourite, this is really good. 4 is going to be like, this is a you know, above average book. 3 is average, 2 is below average, and then 1 is like, oh, I didn't like this book. You know, so this is a solid book, and that's what I've been trying to say the whole time, and I hope that I've got it across, you know. This book has flaws, but this book has a lot going for it as well. But, that's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed. I feel like I've had a bit more energy than I usually do in my videos. Usually I feel a bit, but I'm quite awake right now, and I think that's because of the dopamine from the books that came in the post. But there we are. I will see you all soon. Well, I don't know what I'll be talking about, but we'll be talking about something, and I'll see you all then. Have a good one. Bye.